Yesterday, on the motorcycle ride to Whitby, the Aprilia Tuareg 660 and I had a brief disagreement with a Ford. The Ford won. I dropped the bike, donated most of my dignity to Yorkshire, and snapped the rear brake pedal clean off in the process. Which means today's motorcycle travel episode begins in the most heroic way possible, trying to make the bike functional again. The first job is to get to the nearest Aprilia dealer and see if they have a spare rear brake pedal. If they do, brilliant. If they do not, then I am in trouble. Or I am about to perform the kind of roadside engineering that makes mechanics stare silently into the middle distance. You see, I would rather not ride down the Peak District, emphasis on peak, with this weather on a loaded adventure bike with front brake only. Because I do enjoy being alive, and I have already given Yorkshire enough entertainment this week. Because every road has a story. The destination is Eyam, a small village in the Peak District with one of the most remarkable stories in England. In 1665, plague arrived there, and instead of letting it spread to the villages around them, Eyam chose isolation. A terrible decision, but also an extraordinary act of courage. Anyways, before we ride to one of the most selfless stories in British history, we need to solve a slightly less extraordinary and less noble problem. I need a brake pedal, and ideally not another lecture from gravity. Okay, so after getting a brake lever solution, if only temporary solution, for my back brake problem, we are back in track. So we will continue with the story for today, unless the weather turns to worse. In that case, we'll do a mad dash home. But yeah, I wanted to finish today on a hopeful tone. Finish this series, those 3 episodes, on an hopeful tone. So, what is the story of Eyam? Well, in 1665, plague arrived in this small Peak District village in the most ordinary way imaginable. Not something dramatic, just in a bundle of cloth from London, which is almost offensively mundane. One infected delivery, one village, and suddenly death was inside the walls. Although there were no really walls around the village, but you get what I mean. Plague outbreaks weren't really rare at that time. People feared them, people fled from them, prayed through them, and usually tried to survive by getting away from where they knew the plague was. Eyam did something different. The villagers agreed to quarantine themselves. No one was to leave, no one was to come in. Their own version of COVID-19 quarantine. They would contain the plague inside the village, even if that meant dying there. Not because it was easy or they were fearless, and probably not because every single person woke up that day feeling heroic. And that is the part I keep coming back to. In a village of hundreds, there must have been fear and there must have been doubt. There must have been at least one bloke thinking, I admire the principle, but personally, I am quite attached to living, so I am living. And yet the village held. They chose containment over escape. They chose their neighbors' survival over their own chances. And after Taunton, with all its blood and ambition, and after Whitby, with monsters, storms, and imagination, Eyam feels like the right place to end this little journey of mine. Not with victory, not with horror, but with people in the worst possible circumstances trying to do the least selfish thing available to them. And that, frankly, is why Eyam still matters today. The next question is the practical one. How does a village lock itself away and still eat? But let's talk about that later. So, the biggest question, how did an entire village decide to stay put while plague moved from house to house? They did not just shut the doors and hope for the best. They organized. Around the village, they used boundary stones, which were stones with small holes carved into them. Coins were left in those holes. The holes were full of vinegar, because people believed vinegar could help stop infection from spreading. Whether the science was right or wrong, the system was brutally practical. Eyam villagers left payment at the boundary. People from outside left food and supplies. No handshakes, no market, and definitely no cheerful little chat about the weather while everyone exchanged bubonic plague. And somehow it worked well enough to make him legendary. The disease got through the village, but the wider area was completely spared. The cost was horrific, depending on the source. Perhaps a quarter, perhaps far more of the village died. In a small place like this, that is not a statistic. That is your neighbors, that is families, empty chairs on Sunday service. And this is where Eyam becomes difficult to ignore. Because during COVID, we were asked to isolate with central heating, supermarket deliveries, video calls, streaming services, and the full emotional support of complaining on the internet. Eyam did it with candles, fear, hunger, and the knowledge that the next cart of supplies might never arrive while another household had gone silent. So Whatever we think of modern lockdowns, and believe me, I had several thoughts. Eyam forces a little bit of perspective. They did not choose comfort, they chose containment. And that is why a small village in the Peak District became one of the most quietly extraordinary stories in English history. Anyways, I'll shut up now. Enjoy the view of the farms. And there it is, the right turn into Eyam. Written Eyam, pronounced Im, because English place names are apparently designed to be a national outlander detection system. The road starts climbing almost immediately, like a place that demands you approach it slowly, as if to think before entering. The nice thing about Eyam today is that nothing about it screams tragedy. No battlefield, no ruined castle, no dramatic cliff edge. Just the roads, houses, the fields, and one decision that turned a small village into one of the most quietly extraordinary stories in England. And so up we go. Into the plague village. And so this is where the story stops being a nice little historical anecdote and starts becoming uncomfortable. Eyam's accepted village story begins in 1665 when plague arrived from London in a bale of cloth delivered to the village tailor. The disease spread through the village, eased during winter, and then returned with real cruelty in spring and summer. By then, Eyam faced the decision that made it famous. Under the leadership of William Mompesson and Thomas Stanley, the villagers accepted quarantine. No one leaves, no one comes in, the plague stays here. And that sounds noble when you say it quickly. It sounds almost tidy, isn't it? But standing here, it feels anything but tidy, because quarantine meant watching neighbors die and still not running away. It meant hearing that another house had gone quiet and still keeping the boundary. It meant knowing the safest thing for you might be the most dangerous thing for everyone else. And somehow they held. Supplies came from outside. Money was left in vinegar at places like the Boundary Stone or, like here, the Mompesson's Well. Food was left in return. Even worship moved outdoors, because gathering inside a church during an outbreak is the sort of idea that sounds very pious right up until everyone starts dying in alphabetical order. And the dead were often buried close to home, because there were too many deaths too quickly for normal village life to continue pretending it was normal. The numbers vary slightly depending on the source that you ask, but the village history gives around 260 dead out of roughly 800 people. In August in 1666 alone, the toll was devastating, and then there are places like Riley Graves, where one family paid a price that statistics cannot tell you. 8 members of one single family died within days of each other. And that, I think, is why Eyam matters, because they did not defeat the plague, they did not win a battle. They did not get a clean, heroic ending with flags and music and someone looking meaningfully into the distance. They just stopped it spreading, and that was their victory. A quiet one, a selfless one, but still their victory. This story is not about power or monsters or kings. It is about ordinary people making an impossible decision and then living and dying with that decision. And honestly, that is more frightening than Dracula, because Eyam was real. Well, that was Eyam, a small village in the Peak District with stone cottages, quiet lanes, nice views, and the emotional weight of a falling piano. It is easy to talk about sacrifice when it belongs to someone else, isn't it? It costs nothing to stand here centuries later and say how noble, how brave, because it was not our door the plague knocked on. It was not us being asked to stay while every instinct in the human body screamed, run. And that is what stays with me. Not just that Eyam made the decision, but that they kept making the decision every day over every death. That is not the shiny kind of courage people put on statues. That is the miserable and exhausting kind of courage. And somehow, after Tauten's blood, and Whitby's monsters, and Eyam's plague, this feels like the right place to end the first ride. We began with men killing each other for a crown. We passed through a town that helped give Dracula life. And we end here with ordinary people doing something almost impossible for people they may never even meet. But that is the point, I suppose. Every road has a story. Some are loud, some are dark, some wait quietly in places like this one until you finally slow down enough to hear them. But they all teach you something meaningful. So that is the first little journey done. Tauten, Whitby, Eyam, blood, monsters, plague, and somehow hope at the end. Not exactly a relaxing weekend away considering everything that happened, but still perfectly according to plan. And I would say if this is the sort of thing you like to follow, then please like and subscribe, and I will see you on the next road. Safe travels.